This is one of those films that I was really, really hyped to see. I mean, Les Mis is one of my favorite musicals, so I was really excited to see it, even after hearing the announcement that Russell Crowe was going to be playing Javert, insert South Park joke here, and, well, I had a lot of different mixed feelings going into it. I mean, I was excited for the most part because from what I saw in the trailers, it looked gorgeous, but some of the performances they played to promote it didn't fill me with a lot of hope, but I figured, well, it shot really well, so it'll probably still be worth it. And it also helped the fact that my sister bought the entire family Les Mis tickets as a Christmas present, so it was just a case where there wasn't as much pain as it would be if, say, I had to pay for it in like a 3D experience myself. So, yeah. With that said, let's get started with this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. First thing I have to say, this is one of those films that stumbles at the starting gate. I mean, the opening prologue scene, which is one of my favorite scenes from the musical, it was kind of painful. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I can understand taking out some songs in the musical and changing some lines, I can understand, but really with that opening look down part, there were some changes that were a little unnecessary. I mean, first off, let's talk about Russell Crowe and how he performed in this scene. Basically, he was okay for the most part when he was like actually acting, but literally in one of the parts where he's supposed to sing, he was off tempo. He really was, and that was just a case of, did the editor not see that? They started the music too early, dude. He started too late. Could you not have fixed that in editing? That's something that, I mean, I could have fixed that with just a simple cutaway shot. It's an easy fix. And they didn't fix that. It bothered me. Because the music start where he's supposed to be singing one part and it's just like, it was just, you're listening to it and it's like, and he missed the cue. And I'm just like, was that the best take they had? Could they not have redone it so that he was actually on tempo? That was the first thing that bothered me with that opening scene. The second thing that bothered me was some of the line changes in that particular exchange between Valjean and Javert. The stuff that's kind of supposed to set up the entire rivalry between them and how tense things are between them. I mean, like the key lines that kind of have that where he has the, you are a thief, I stole a loaf of bread, you robbed a house, I broke window pane. They took out the robbed a house, broke a window pane, and they changed the you are a thief line. They still have like, I stole a loaf of bread, but the line that preceded it, it doesn't make sense. They changed, it was one of those needless changes that just threw the whole thing off. It was just a case that, it was just a case where I was looking at it and I was just going, why? Why change that line? Why break that rhythm? And I'm guessing it was just another case with Russell Crowe being off tempo, throwing off the rhythm as well. It's just a case of the whole entire rhythm is thrown off. You're not matching up with it at all. You may as well at least have it be a cappella so that it's not as annoying. So that was the major thing that I noticed with that, is that some of the lyrical changes were a little pointless and needless, and with that particular exchange, the rhythm just was wonky. It was off. And that was kind of how it was with the prologue. It's just that the singing wasn't that pleasant during that opening part. It picks up when Valjean meets the priest. I mean, they omit some of the stuff from the opening prologue because naturally it can be shown with an image faster than on stage, where on stage they have the musical certain parts of the number to act as exposition. And so those changes I was fine with because it's a case of, well, it's film, show don't tell. But when it gets to the priest, it's when it somewhat starts to pick up, but it still suffers from some of the same problems. I understand with the whole recording the singing live and getting those raw emotional responses out of the actors. That's fine and all, but it was just kind of a case of where they couldn't quite decide which lines were to be sung and which lines were to be spoken. The priest is the only one that actually did it right, because it was kind of a case where how it usually is in musicals, where they speak a bit and then go into the song, and that's how the priest had it, is that he spoke a part of the line and then sang the rest and kind of continued with it. That's how it should have been, but problem is that parts of the film, and it's not just in the opening bit, but also just in later parts of the film where they have them singing and then suddenly it's abrupt how they go into how they're just talking it or whispering it. In the case of Castle on a Cloud is the point where it was the most annoying, where she's singing this like nice little song and then suddenly, like literally towards the end, like the whole Cosette I love you very much, it just suddenly goes into this whisper and I'm just like, Why cut off the music? You could have at least kept the music going so that it wasn't so jarring. It's after the prologue, it's when they get into, at the end of the day, when that part of the story really takes off is when everything starts to get better. It's when the suspension of disbelief really starts to kick in, mostly because you hear a lot of other voices in it, and basically the fact that it's a musical finally cements it because you hear more Broadway people who are used to this sort of thing and used to performing in musicals actually singing, and that's what draws you in a lot better than the opening prologue, even though the opening prologue is supposed to be what draws you in. And again, it was just that opening number, that opening prologue bit almost broke the movie for me. It almost made it not so pleasant, because it kind of put out a lot of the major flaws up front. When you get past the prologue, the film really picks up, and you get into it a lot easier. I mean, you got At the End of the Day, which is a really good, strong number. And basically, it starts the way that a musical film really should start. Something that really draws you in from the... really establishes the fact that it's a musical right off the bat. I mean, a good example is in Look Down, they don't have them start with the which is a very important thing. It's mostly silent, and then it's just Hugh Jackman singing the solo part of the first line, which kind of also wrecked that bit a little bit, because it's supposed to be that all the voices are kind of singing at the same time. They're all the same. They're all prisoners. They're all in the same boat, for lack of a better term, no pun intended. And there it's just like, oh, he's the main star. Let's focus on him solely, and then we'll just have one by one. And so it really didn't have as large of a scale in that opening number that I would have liked. In the case of the acting, the biggest kudos actually go to Anne Hathaway and Eddie Redmayne. Anne Hathaway was playing Fantine, and Eddie Redmayne, who played Marius. Those are the two actors that actually had the strongest performances. They were really able to put their all into their numbers. This is the case where showcasing the fact that the singing was recorded live really works, especially in the case of Empty Chairs and Empty Tables. That's the point where you get the real emotional response and how Marius is actually feeling in that scene, and you really see it visibly on his face and in his voice, but it also still has a case that they can still sing and still give that great of a performance. And so Empty Chairs and Empty Tables and I Dreamed a Dream were the numbers that showcase the best of the film, in my opinion. As for really the major flaws, again, the biggest flaws come from the two biggest people of the film, Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. In the case of Hugh Jackman's performance, you can tell he's giving it all, and he's a really good actor in this particular scene. The problem is that he's singing out of his range, and it shows. I mean, there are some songs that he's able to do a good job in, but other ones you can tell he's really, really struggling with. Because from what people have told me, and from what I've observed, Jean Valjean in the musical calls for an operatic tenor, and Hugh Jackman is a baritone. And as someone who's been in a choir and used to sing baritone, I don't really classify as anything anymore because I'm not that great of a singer. It's hard when you have to sing a lot higher than usual. It really is, and that's something that it really shows that he's struggling with it, but in parts that don't require as much of an operatic tone or as much of a projecting tone, but stuff that's a little softer and more intimate, Hugh Jackman does an okay job. Now, in the case of Russell Crowe, it's a case where he can't really act and sing at the same time. I mean, when he's acting as Javert, he does a really good job acting, and when he's singing, he's an okay singer, but he's not really singing as Javert, he's singing as Russell Crowe. The only times where there are really the exceptions is in Stars and Javert's Suicide. Those are the two numbers that Russell Crowe does a really good job. I'm guessing mostly because he doesn't have to bounce off of another person in the scene. That's another key thing, because when you're doing a Broadway musical and have to work off someone, if one person in the scene drops the ball, it can fall apart really badly. I've spent enough time as a bad actor to see this. They really should have invested the money to have him taking like a 2-month diction class or something, because that's an important part of Javert's character, is the diction. It's not a case of one day more till revolution. It's one day more till revolution. And that's part of Javert's character. He's supposed to be an upstanding, uptight officer of the law. He's like a soldier, pretty much. He's like a soldier in a war on crime. That's his character. And when Russell Crowe didn't have to sing, he was able to perform that really well, but when he has to sing, it's like you almost kind of lose it. That's also another thing I noticed, is that when you see certain shots and editing choices, they don't really mesh with the musical format very well. It's almost a case where if it was an adaptation of the novel and not the musical, that imagery would have been a lot stronger. They could have had the editing a lot more tight. Because the first thing with certain numbers is that they tend to hold on to certain shots for too long, and it's not even just a case where they're just shots that are locked down like this camera, and are held for too long, but it's more like a case where it's like a handheld shot where they're following them, trying to keep them in focus, and that shot is like held on for way, way too long. And it's most noticeable in I Dreamed a Dream. I understand she's supposed to be kind of alone, talking to herself by herself thing, but just having the same 2T shot showing that struggling to keep her in focus for the entire song, it felt weird. It didn't really feel right. It was like a case of, you can cut to something else, cut to a different angle, at least add more to the actual visuals that the song would be trying to illustrate, or at least, for example, like show her, like in the trailer. In the trailer they showed her singing, she was pretty much like in a sewer. The entire background was like large and empty and devoid of people to really illustrate that she was alone, but they don't have that shot in the film, and it was really unfortunate. I can understand they probably made some changes between showing that trailer and actually shooting. That was probably just the scene they shot to just promote it, but it was just a case of that shot really illustrated the loneliness and sadness a lot more clearly than the shot they went with in I Dreamed a Dream in this film. And again, like I said, if it was an adaptation of the novel, some of the shots they were trying to do and some of the tension they were trying to build would have been a lot more stronger, but it was kind of a case of, well, it's a musical, we kind of got to keep to the same tempo as the music from the musical for some of these shots. The biggest example is when there's a chase scene between Javert and Valjean, when Valjean has Cosette, and he's trying to elude Javert at like this border gate church thingy. And it's just a case where it's the pacing of the editing and the shots just don't lend itself to really build that tension. It's almost kind of like they're almost limited by the fact that it's a musical. Overall, this is still an incredible film. It has some really strong and powerful imagery. It's shot really well. You have some really good performances from the minor roles and a lot of the other actors aside from Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. And even then, later on in the film, they actually get really good performances because it was kind of a case where they were more comfortable with what they were doing. And so the film is still really incredible. I still highly recommend that you see it while it's in theaters. But I still gotta warn you, it takes a while for the suspension of disbelief to kick in, especially with that opening scene. The opening scene almost kind of ruins the experience because it almost kind of breaks it, and it kind of breaks the suspension of disbelief before the suspension of disbelief can really set in. So on my personal scale, I'm giving Les Misérables a 4 out of 5. Like I said, that opening scene, it's one of my favorite stuff from the musical because that's what sets everything up. It sets the tone up, and they stumble. They really drop the ball with the opening scene, but everything else in the film is really good. Like, hands down, really good. You're probably gonna see some Oscar nominations, especially for Anne Hathaway's performance and for some of the other minor performances like Eddie Redmayne from Marius and the actress they have for Eponine. And unfortunately, I don't know her name, but she did a really good job. The minor characters did a much better job than the main two players, which are Hugh Jackman as Valjean and Russell Crowe as Javert. So, really, I recommend you watch it while it's in theaters. It's a really incredible film. I highly recommend it, but prepare to wince a little when you're watching the opening prologue. That's all I can really say. So yeah, that's it for this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. No, I'm not going to be really watching any films next week. However, on December 30th or 31st, one of the two, I'll be making a video taking a look back at all the films I reviewed this year and giving you my top 5 picks of the best films of 2012. See you then. Oh yeah, and another thing I'm hoping to have up by New Year's Eve, if I can get the right equipment together, is what I like to call Romney's Retro Challenge. To give you the basic premise of the idea, well, just look up Game Center CX and you'll get a pretty clear idea of what I'm hoping to accomplish. I just have to see if I can get certain equipment and certain things set up in order to do it the way I would like. It's not going to be a Let's Play. I friggin' hate Let's Plays. They go on way too long and are really stupid to watch. That's just me. So, yeah. If you're still watching after the credits this long, then, well, good on you. I was thinking of doing an end screen like a lot of those newfangled YouTubers have been doing, but really, what's the point? Why are you still here? Click on something else!